Hey guys, Sarah here and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my first book review on David Gemmell's Legend, which is the first in a series about the Draenei universe. Now the first book in the series primarily revolves around the character of Druss the Legend. Druss is known for being this epic warrior and is kind of renowned in the universe for his history of helping the Draenei Empire win battles in the past. At this point in the novel, Druss is around 60 years old, and it's following his narrative and how he's going to help or hinder the Draenei Empire. The interesting thing about David Gemmell's writing style is that it's not overly intricate. He's not a super refined writer. There's more of an raw element to his writing, which is reflective of the universe and what's going on with the characters and the plot and the setting of the series, particularly pertaining to the character of Druss. There's almost a rugged or unrefined character to the writing style, which helps emphasize the universe of the book. This textural style of Gemmell's writing actually helps stylistically the characters and the overall plot more believable to us as readers, in my opinion. Now, normally I'm a big fan of intricate details pertaining to the setting and the characters, especially the setting, because I find if there's more of a rich setting, it helps me to immerse myself fully in the world of the book or the series that I'm reading. With Gemmell, there's kind of the exact opposite of this. It's not that the writing is lacking, it's just that he's more straight to the point and it's kind of less frosting, I guess you could say. Now, this type of writing style wouldn't work in every kind of narrative, but I find with the universe that Gemmell's trying to portray, with the rawness and the kind of political intrigue and the contestation of the different parties at war in the book, makes it more believable. At the very beginning of the book, we are introduced to a set of young travelers. One of the first characters' name is Rek. Now, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of his name, so I apologize to any Gemmell purists out there, but it's kind of one of those names where I'm not 100% sure there is anywhere confirmed pronunciation of his name, so I do apologize for that. Now, Rek is a berserker. For those of you who don't know what a berserker is, it's a type of fighter that originated in Norse mythology, and it's kind of like berserkers enter this odd mental state where they get really angry and kind of trance-like state where they're harder to pull out of battle, but are also better warriors when they're in this state of mind. The other person in this coupling of characters is Vire. Also apologize for any mispronunciation of that name because it's also one of those odd names. She's the daughter of a well-known noted figure in the Draenei series. But Vire is this really tough, intelligent, unique character, especially during this time. She kind of breaks gender normativity, which I'm going to talk a bit about a little bit later. But they make a really amazing coupling because of the dynamic between them. Rick is kind of more of a compassionate but passive character, whereas Vire is more of the typical male character, I guess you could say. She's kind of got that aggression more and more intelligent qualities that, especially during this time, because Gemmell wrote it during the 80s, would be typically associated with the male gender. Now, I'm not saying that these characters don't both contain qualities that the other has. They both have moments of compassion. Both of them are amazing soldiers, but it's just in the typical sense of Vire, you would assume would be very typically female, kind of more gentle, compassionate, and you would associate Rek with being the more aggressive one. Those roles have been switched, so there's kind of a subversion of gender normativity, which I really love. Anytime that there's a really, sorry, but I can't think of any other term, kick-ass female character, I get really excited, because I hate when there's those typical female roles where they're just kind of passive and need to be saved. Vire does not need to be saved by anyone. She saves herself, and it's awesome. The plot of the entire narrative is driven primarily by Rek, Vire, some secondary characters, and obviously Druss, who's essentially the title character of the narrative. Before we go any further with watching this video, I am going to forewarn you there are going to be some spoilers, so if you haven't read the book, stop at this point, and I apologize if I spoiled anything as of this point. but I'm pretty sure I haven't. For me personally, Dress was the most interesting part of the narrative because I found myself personally conflicted with his personality at most parts of the book. Initially, when we're introduced to him, he's kind of given this ultimatum of either fading and kind of becoming senile or willingly entering into his death knowing that he could help save the kingdom. Now, prior to even meeting Dress, there is this kind of supernatural aura around him. We know him as a legend, the man behind the axe, but we don't know anything about him as a human being. So when he's offered this ultimatum and he very willingly agrees to return to battle and walk into his death, I became frustrated. Obviously, he doesn't want to become senile and die alone, but on the same token, he doesn't even try to fight for himself or fight for a life that he could have. He just openly accepts his death, which initially to me seemed a bit pathetic, I guess is the word I would use. Especially because he's 60 years old at this point and he openly admits to not being in the best physical condition. So he knows that he's probably not going to succeed in battle, and because it has been prophesied that he's going to die, he's almost positive he's going to die. And he still goes. Now, the other generals and characters in the story very blatantly say that they feel like Dress's involvement in the war could possibly save them, just even simply by having his presence there to increase morale amongst other soldiers. But when he agrees to come back to war and encounters the other soldiers, one of the other generals note to him that he is giving the exact same speech to every single soldier, and Dress is very dismissive of it and kind of is like, yeah, we do what we gotta do or whatever. And at this point, I became even more frustrated with him as a character because to me, it just made it seem like he didn't care or he wasn't really invested in the cause. He just wanted to die. He was done with life and he didn't really want to fight for his people anymore. He just wanted to enter into death and he was done. Now, at this point in the narrative, we're probably about halfway through the book. There's been time for Dress to give some development and for us to see some growth in him as a character and kind of see this epic figure that we've been told existed at some point in battles previous to the one we're experiencing in this narrative. But I haven't seen any major growth. I don't know if any of you guys have read this book or what your thoughts or opinions are, but I personally didn't see it. So at this point, I'm kind of like, how is he an epic figure? Why is he so revered in the context of this book? Why is there an entire book named after a character that I'm not even invested in? I care more about what's going on with other characters and anything else in the book than the one that's supposed to be the main character, that's supposed to be the legend. Now, I kind of sat the book down for a short period of time just to kind of contemplate where I was sitting with Dress. Did I even want to finish reading this book if it's supposed to be centered around him? Am I even fully invested enough to care? And then it kind of hit me. Dress reminded me of another really well-known character that I had studied before at school. Kind of really into the mythology of Greek and Rome. And the character that Dress really reminds me of is Achilles from the Iliad. Most people who haven't thoroughly studied the Iliad or Achilles as a character, most people see Achilles as this epic character who was an amazing fighter and was really honorable and saved a lot of people. But for those who had more knowledge of Achilles, he isn't exactly that type of person. Like Dress, Achilles had two choices. He was informed that if he were to continue to go into battle, he would die an epic death, but he would be remembered and respected for years to come. If he chose not to go on and fight, then he too would kind of fade into history and people won't remember him and the battle would go on without him, and he didn't really know who would win or who would lose or what exactly would happen with his life. Considering we all know Achilles now and we know at least part of his story, we know that he went on to fight and is obviously remembered for being this really epic figure, like Dress is initially painted out to be. In finding this comparison for myself, I found myself empathizing with Dress more and appreciating Gemmell as a writer more. Instead of fading into history or finding other possibilities that would have just been living a mundane life, Dress chose to fight instead of die. He refused to quit, and in refusing to quit, he was acknowledging and openly walking into his death, which I initially viewed as pathetic, like he just wanted his death. But as you see his interactions with the soldiers, and you know that he could have easily taken a simpler death. He could have killed himself, he could have starved himself, he could have died a previous battle, but he doesn't. He chooses to fight in every single battle. He chooses to motivate other soldiers, and in the end, he dies, which is foretold, but still really big spoiler. For the life that he chose and for the battles that he fought, Just will be remembered for his death, for his honor, instead of for cowardice or for refusing to come to battle when he had the option to. Most importantly, for the fact that in his final act, he chose to be selfless instead of taking the easy route out. Now, although I did end up respecting Dress more as a character in the end, he was definitely not my favorite part of the book, which I know is like blasphemous for huge Gemmell fans, so I'm sorry guys, but I really liked the interaction between Rick and V-Ray. Now, one of my biggest literary pet peeves is when there's an unnecessary or rushed romance, and initially I thought that's what was going to happen with these two characters. It does progress pretty quickly, but I found myself not caring, which was a big statement about my investment in the characters. I was so in love with the kind of gender subversion between the two of them that Gemmell had provided with them as characters, and also the comical banter that occurred between them, that I didn't care that they had literally only known each other for, what, days, maybe a couple weeks before they decided to pursue their relationship as a romance. Most heartbreaking point for me in the entire book was when V-Ray died, actually. To the point where I sat the book down and would not touch it for days. Like, I left it. Usually I plow through a book in a day, which is what I did with the rest of this book. But when she died, I wouldn't touch it. I left it for days. And I kind of just sat there like, do I even want to read this anymore? I already know that Dress is going to die. Do I care? I'm really happy I picked the book back up because, in fact, she ends up coming back to life. Now, it is a very serious case of Deus Ex Machina, which is one of my favorite literary tropes, especially in classical literature. When this kind of otherworldly, usually divine force comes in and intervenes to give the characters a happy ending. Now, I know it's super corny and you don't always want it to be a stupid happy ending, but in this case, I loved the character so much that I was like, thank you, literary gods. Thank you. I would have freaked out if she died. I did freak out when she died, actually. Now, the last feature of this book that I really wanted to talk about was the kind of religious undertones. When discussing religion in books, I find that it can get really, really sticky if it's too in your face or if it's too much of a dominant theme. It kind of leaves a bitter taste in my mouth, but Gemmell did it really tastefully in this book. There's a subplot running throughout the entire narrative following a group of characters called the 30. Now, what the 30 are is a group of warriors that use a combination of spiritual forces, like divine forces, and the mind to fight the war that the Draenei are experiencing throughout the narrative. But it was really tastefully done because the religious aspect isn't shoved in your face, and it also really focuses on the kind of characters within the 30 instead of the religious aspects of it, which I really appreciated. Now, I know my review is a bit all over the place. I apologize for that. This is the first one I'm doing. If I had to recommend this book to any type of reader, I would definitely recommend it for those who enjoy high fantasy that is primarily plot driven, maybe not as much character driven, although I personally fell in love with the characters. I found that the overall plot was a much stronger aspect of the narrative. The type of audience I would suggest Legend to is probably fans of like The Lord of the Rings, Wheels of Time, even A Song of Ice and Fire series, because it has those kind of high fantasy aspects of it. There's really good battle scenes. They're good characters, but not to the point where it's heavily character driven. If I were to rate this on a star system, I would probably give it 4 out of 5. I really loved this book, more than I thought I would, but I'm really happy I read it because it proved to me that you don't have to be a fantastic writer to create a fantastic universe or a fantastic novel. Now, I'm not saying that Gemmell was a bad writer, but his style of writing is not the type of writing I would normally go for. There are a few other books in the series, which I plan to read at some point. I don't know if I'll love them as much, because the main thing I loved about this book was the interaction between the young couple, and I'm not exactly sure if they're in the other book yet. That's it for now, guys. Thanks for watching my review. If you enjoyed watching it, please hit subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of your day. Just isn't the only one with a battle axe.